which was written and directed by Kristen Sheridan, called Darklight, which is by John Wallis. And they've just finished shooting on Friday. And so we thought it would be really interesting to kind of hear a little bit about their experiences and maybe their plans, or try and if we can all look at what their project is and hear a little bit about it and think about ideas of things that they could be doing while they're going through the post-production process. Nikki just asked me to say as well that the digital shorts, virtual cinema shorts, sorry, are premiering at 6:30 this evening at Brand Social, and you're all invited along to that as well. So please do go. So do you guys want to talk about it?
Yeah, sure.
John Mills is a 70-minute observational documentary focusing on a 15-year-old girl who lives here in Dublin and who wears pyjamas as day wear, which is she's part of a phenomenon which kind of kicked off here within the last 5 years, which has basically brought about this kind of furious public response. For some reason, wearing pyjamas provokes extreme anger in the general public, and it's kind of symptomatic, I suppose, of a response to a certain sector of society. She grew up in the inner city, and she has kind of various challenges facing her on a day-to-day basis. Her mother is a heroin addict and is absent, and she kind of lives in an environment where there are no men around. There's kind of a complete lack of male role models. So we see it as a very universal story, in that although the pyjama wearing phenomenon is something which is specifically Irish, her experiences kind of translate across continents. And it's a kind of intimate look at her day-to-day life kind of in a teenage girl's bedroom. And at the heart of it is her relationship with her best friend, Tara, which kind of gives her the energy to continue through kind of problems with through conflicts with authority and with her peers. There's a lot of references to street violence. The film took us by surprise in terms the response to the film took us by surprise in that it has been a kind of hit on a populist level as well as in art house cinema. So it had a sellout run in the IFI, which is the local art house cinema around the corner, and then thanks to Nikki's fantastic self-distribution campaign, it played in multiplexes as well for a period of weeks, which was great for us. But what we haven't managed to crack is the international market. So we basically haven't got into any of the big festivals, although we are at an early stage of pitching to them. But so it has no life beyond Ireland at the moment. It's had a kind of national release as well. So we feel that somehow something is missing in the way that we're selling it, and the way that we're kind of going out there internationally. And maybe
Do you want to play this?
Yeah.
On the topic of PJs, so many people have been getting in touch on this one. It's amazing how, I suppose, wound up we get about it.
It's just disgraceful looking to see them walking around in their pyjamas and their stomachs hanging out all over the place. Like,
my name's Lauren. I'm 15 years of age. Me ma, she was gone to hell like proper, and utterly gone mad. Like, before had a full blown scrap. Like, I gave her a dig so hard in the face that she dropped. Like, and I bust her lip open. Then she got a can, like, and tripped the can open and tried to slice me with it. She's a bit of a psycho. Me and Tara was meant to be born on the same day.
That is my lighter.
Is it?
That's the lighter Graham gave me. Remember the day you brought it on me? It's coloured in blue, look.
Just show me.
See the bits of blue? Me and Graham coloured it in with a permanent blue marker.
Like, she looks out for me all the time, and I look out for her, like. If it wasn't for that, I don't know what way I'd be now. I'd probably be strung out.
Do you want us to ask specific questions or?
And can we ask questions?
Yeah,
as well?
absolutely. I think that's exactly what it should be, and anyone else who wishes to. Who wants to kick it off? Do you have anything specifically any thoughts that you've had or ideas that you've had that you wanted to kind of throw out there to get some feedback on, or?
We're just kind of like career-wise, I suppose that it's had a bit, it's done pretty well here for a small Irish documentary, and in the festivals here it did really well. Like they put on extra screenings of it when it showed at the Strange and Fiction Festival here. But but it's just been a kind of a weird one trying to. I don't know, maybe it is a story issue. We chatted briefly about it last night. Maybe it's it's a story that isn't going to get told internationally, but we kind of feel that it is does have a kind of global sort of story in there.
Can I ask a question real quick? What is it that you found resonates? Like what made it such a cultural phenomenon, that the fact that people were so turned off by the fact that she was wearing pajamas? What is at the core of that, like culturally? So I understand the significance, because in the United States people wear pajamas, so I understand that from the working class side, and what that meant and why it was such a big deal here.
Yeah, the association is that if you wear pajamas, you're basically opting out of society and stating very clearly that you don't work and that you have no intention of working. I mean, that's my analysis of it. But having said that, when people kind of make their responses, I don't think that is kind of clear in their mind. There seems to be a sort of visceral response to it. People really, the kind of online rants and the sort of radio chat rants tend to kind of focus actually on like young female sexuality and have a similar slant to rants about single mothers. I don't know if that topic kind of gets people riled in the States, but it certainly does.
And is it a certain demographic that has issue with it? Like a certain age group that has issue with the fact that?
Actually, no, it's really kind of across the board.
All across the board?
Yeah. I mean, funnily enough, maybe possibly more male. Men seem to get particularly angry about it, and men have a different response to the film than women. We just not you can't be completely generalised, but I think women watching the film seem to come away kind of recognising, like feeling kind of familiar with the teenage experience, but men watching the film have kind of expressed a slight disturbance at the kind of aggression and strength of the women, possibly, that there's something that kind of hits a nerve there, and maybe that replicates the kind of the wider societal response. Yeah.
And it's a subject matter that's pretty tough all the way through the film.
Yes.
But you focus on the relationship of the two girls. Is that kind of warm at any point, or is it?
Yeah, people, I mean, I feel it's very warm, and actually was kind of surprised at the extent to which people found it, that some people kind of found it kind of disturbing and quite kind of shaking. But certainly in terms of the reviews we've got, the feedback has been that that it kind of gives an understanding of two characters who could be kind of quite, I don't know, distanced from the rest of society in a way which I think definitely is kind of replicated from country to country, that they're sort of two aggressive young girls who seem to not want to fit in any way.
There's a lot of humour in it as well. It should be said. Yeah, there's a lot. Certainly in terms of an Irish audience, there's a lot of laughs in it as well. They're quite a double act. They can be quite funny at times. So.
And it's subtitled throughout, because that was the big kind of problem that the international audience had. What's been kind of great for us is that international viewers watching it have come away with extremely positive feedback, because there was a concern that possibly the humour and even the kind of turns of phrase might be untranslatable, as well as the kind of general experience, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
I mean, it's a classic story of the outsider. So you that's where I'm, in my mind, where I'm placing it now. It's the story of this outside counterculture. So my question to you would be, how did you discover this community of people? How did you hear about it? And what got you riled up to say that this is a voice that needs to be put up on the big screen? And use that as a starting point so that I can understand, how did you find these people? How did the community respond to you making a documentary? Some of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something which the kind of press has picked up on a lot here, because we got a lot of press.
No, I mean from your personal point of view.
And I shall get to that. Which is that, basically I was walking on the street kind of, I don't know, 4 years ago, and bumped into a gang of girls wearing pyjamas and found myself incredibly shocked to see them, when I wouldn't consider myself to be someone who would ever be shocked at what people were wearing. My brain felt completely kind of confused by what I saw. I thought that they had to leave their homes because the houses were on fire or something crazy like that. So then I just was really interested in my own response. So it kind of began as an exploration of my response, really. And then we kind of did a trawl of the streets to just chat to people who wore pyjamas. And it took us a long, long time actually filming before we met Tara and Lauren, who became the kind of the main characters. But as soon as we kind of began filming with them, we were kind of inundated with calls from, say, like TV production companies who wanted to get pyjama girls on their sort of daytime shows, say, to talk about their experience, because for some reason it seemed to be a kind of sector of society that people were finding it very hard to kind of to tap into. Funnily enough, though, the pyjama phenomenon element of it, I think, is part of our problem in getting it to the international audience, because I think kind of the first response is like, well, you know, we don't have this phenomenon, so we don't care. Whereas actually, I think the outsider, the kind of...
It makes it more general. It's like this is the story of the outsider in your inner cities, you know, the pyjama girls. I keep thinking the exploitation 50s and 60s posters of that. You know, they've got these hard-edged girls who stick up for themselves, but they're wearing pyjamas which are kind of like... it's not their armor. They're wearing something that's in the bedroom. It's quite feminine. So it's kind of like, but they've got this attitude to back it up. So their attitude isn't in their clothing. It's in them. And there's this interesting dynamic. There's so much to explore. I'm looking forward to seeing your film. But it's that for me is this tale of the outsider in the inner city who live their own rules, live by their own means, have got their own attitudes, and are hard done by and fighting out. That's for me is what's popping into my mind.
And just wanted to ask, how have the girls responded, the two girls involved in the film, and the kind of people that wear pyjamas, in part of that community? Because I know in Liverpool, for example, in England, that's something that's quite common. A friend of mine runs a nursery there, and it's not uncommon for the mums to come in and pick up and drop off in pyjamas. Sorry. But I was just kind of, you know, I have some kind of awareness, but not huge. But how have the girls in the community responded?
Well, our first screening of the film was to Lauren and Tara, and that was probably our most terrifying screening. And we were just so kind of pleased that they had a positive response. Their first words afterwards were. That was actually okay, that film. Which is
in teenage land.
So we screened the film again in Ballyferm, one of the main areas where it's filmed, and I was just delighted that there were various kind of young teenage girls and mothers there who said that they felt it really kind of represented their experience, and that they had been engaged throughout the film. Because actually, it is kind of quite a festival. It is sort of a festival film and could be perceived as quite artless, but yet for some reason it does translate to them. Like music was a kind of major element for us in the film, and we were very lucky to work with Dennis McNulty, who is a sound artist, and he created all the sounds from sounds that he created the music from sounds he recorded in the flats, but tried to also kind of pick up on themes that were popular with the girls themselves, like kind of ringtones, phones, and this kind of thing. So, I think that is one thing which helped that audience kind of engage with what they saw and kind of feel a kind of familiarity as well as the subject matter.
And can I go back just to ask, for you, going back to that question of why you made it, who did you make it for? I mean, who do you feel, by the time you got to the end of the documentary, do you feel there were some messages that came out? What kind of messages came out of the documentary? And who did you make it for? Who do you feel the audience is for? Because that, you know, an art house audience is a very different audience to the teenage
14, 15
audience. Is it for them?
Yeah.
Do you feel it's for them now you finished the film?
Well, I suppose I kind of...
Or is it a social issue documentary that you want to show to a certain sector, a society you feel they should see?
Yeah, I've always been kind of interested in getting to quite a kind of populist audience actually, so not to kind of preach to the converted. So I suppose I kind of, to be honest, wanted to kind of stick one in the eye to all the ranting people on the radio, really. But then it did kind of become something, but in a way which didn't seem to be, kind of overtly stand against them. Like what has been great for me, people watching the film, was people kind of coming out sort of saying, oh, you know, I kind of understand those people. Like, I understand those people who were so alien to me before to a greater extent. So, yeah, so it's not. I'm glad that it works for an art house audience, but it's more important for me that it works for a wider audience.
Well, I think it's, you know, some of the things just as an outside perspective is, you know, breaking past that, what effectively is so significant here is a cultural difference that maybe isn't necessarily so translated in other places. You know, and the title and the push and what you have is, in regards to what it is, makes you, you know, in some ways, just my impression of it is really about that idea of class, you know, and that's everywhere. So then it's really kind of like, how do you drill down and get to that more as a core in those other territories or where you want to take it. And then finding ways that you can kind of mirror that. So if you want more of a wide audience, finding some connection between the characters that you have on screen and then actually trying to push in with a youth audience, I think would probably be a better way to kind of come in with it, you know, I guess it depends on how you're willing to release it and what you want to do with the film and how you get it out to them, you know, and making it more accessible to where they are, and that core element of, you know, what they're doing, their behavior in it, and how that would resonate with other audiences that were of their age. So they're not going to go to the art house cinemas to see it. So how do you get it in front of them? You know, and what do you do with it? I guess some of that raises other questions in terms of what your goals are with the project. In terms of like, are you looking for territorial sales for it? Are you looking for like some degree of recoupment? Where's the degree of like true wide audience and the power of what you have with the project and what drove you to it? So I think that there's a couple things that maybe have to be addressed there, because like, you could take something like this and you could do some really interesting things with it online. You could do some really interesting things around messaging with it. You could do all kinds of interesting things in terms of the use of the wearing of pajamas and the solidarity between pajamas and what they wear in other countries and so forth and so on. It just depends on how willing you are to go outside the box of what that traditional is. You know, that's how I see it at this point.
Because I think you said it's been hard in terms of festivals already, which is probably in terms of a kind of festival film that has a release in independent screens is really tough. And you know, but in terms of what Lance said, I think there may be some interesting alternative partnerships if you want to reach that audience, and it's thinking about where the channels of people are for a start, and also thinking in terms of different types of organisations who may work with different kind of groups or teams, and there are loads of different types, whether they're NGOs or whether they're kind of community organisations or whether they're kind of like, you know, you were saying, the outsider idea is really interesting, and how people group together in alternative spaces as well. So there's loads of, and I think that's a kind of much more interesting
underground culture, counterculture. It's a rebellion.
I think it's about,
and it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think for me it's kind of like guys need to find that hook, that sentence, that thing that you can communicate it like outside of this context. And like you said about where to go with it, I mean, there's options. If you're thinking of a kind of young female demographic, then there's loads of strategic partners that you can look at in terms of organisations, but also in terms of companies and brands. So, for example, like one straight off the top of my head would be something like Tampax, for instance. If you can get that audience, then they'll be interested in. Gosh, that's really very weird.
This is my phone, I think, actually.
But if you think in terms of like the audience that you want to get, the audience that you think your project is going to speak to, and then if you think about what platforms that audience engages on, and you think about what kind of issues and hooks there are in your film because they wear pyjamas, so you can run around pyjama Monday. There's the outsider, there's the class system, but do you know what? There might just be something that one of them says that's just really funny that you can pull as a clip, and that can generate a viral. There's kind of reaching into your content and finding those moments and those bits that just are really engaging and interesting, and maybe building it out from there would be a good place to start.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like you could do a couple things, you know, like some type of a flash mob based stuff in and around the wearing of pajamas, you know, and then you know, doing some really simple things in terms of like, there are a lot of sites that are set up to help people determine like the wardrobe and things, and like being able to swap out clothes, you know, being able to do like certain things with like an app or a way that you can swap out, you know, like the wear of the pajamas or the customization of the pajamas or whatever it is. But it seems like if you want to take it international, you really have to kind of create some type of a bonding between these characters and other people who would want to understand.
I've got a pajama party screening that you do internationally, you know, get everyone together in the pajamas and watch Pajama Girl, and it could be a hook and it could be a press thing.
You could do like National Pajama Day and tie it up with a charitable organisation that has a big network and reach, and then you just...
I mean, what sort of...
Is there a National Pajama Day?
Well, there is right now. When guys, when's National Pajama Day?
But is there a particular brand of pajama that they wear? Because there's different colours and classes, there must be different symbols with the clothing that they're wearing.
Oh, Primark.
They did it like you
Primark don't do marketing.
It's what is it?
Primark.
I don't know if you, there's a brand that's called Primark in England.
It's called Primani.
Yeah.
Primani.
It's pennies and pounds.
Yeah. Did you have a Facebook page or anything like that?
I'm from Liverpool originally.
I'm sorry, what?
Came across, sorry?
I was having trouble hearing you.
Oh yeah, I'm from Liverpool originally, and I first came across this pyjama thing in Liverpool in about 2003. I'm back and forth all the time, you know. And at that time, there was little girls like about 7 and 8 who were wearing them. It hadn't spread to the bigger ones, you know. And some people who were kind of involved in the community and working with young girls said at the time that it was a reaction to uniform. That it was about, you know, you've got to come in, take off your school uniform, then you've got to change into your playing out clothes, then you've got to change into pyjamas, then the next morning, you know, it starts again, and plus there's all that washing. Plus they didn't have much money to go out and buy outfits and compete with each other. So the pyjamas, and particularly Primark or Pennies, is really, really cheap. You know, so it's a way for them to be anti-uniform, anti-fashion,
rebel.
anti-society as well, because the backlash would be huge, and a lot of people in Liverpool would be on the radio saying they're bone idle. You're too lazy to get changed, and too lazy to wash the clothes and all that. So I think it's kind of coming from there as well. But the other thing I wanted to say is I was at another one of these courses a few weeks ago, online narrative that Screen Training put on. And there was a writer there, and she's written a couple of teenage soaps, online soaps for girls, Ashley's Diary and Sophia's Diary, you know, and they used these multi-platform marketing devices very well, you know. And the characters were texting, which was shown, had diaries, had blogs, people could interact. And I would think that this is ideal for you know, because what you're talking about here is a new audience that's not tapped. The girls who wear pajamas, they don't go to festivals. You know, they don't go to art houses, and they don't watch documentaries and all the rest of it. And I don't think it's about, like, let's have, you know, make a uniform out of it. I think that's what it's not about for them, you know. So if you had something that comes from them, maybe if you talk some more to your girls who are in it and their friends, and had them blog it, and then they're speaking to their peers, they're speaking to other girls who are just like them. Otherwise, it's becoming it's middle classified. You really be taken away and you turn it into something that it's not. So that would be my suggestion anyway, to keep it coming from the girls themselves, see what originates from them, have them blog and text it and do diaries and the whole lot, and talking to other girls who feel just the way they did, and have that, you know, and it's a whole new audience, I think.
And it continues the journey of those characters through the film as well, and into that international realm, and it gives them something to
Can I just ask though,
offer.
before we go further down this route, how have the girls reacted to their kind of newfound fame, and are they on board with the project? Like, how do they feel about everything that's been happening with their lives?
At the moment, they are delighted with just the kind of having the focus on them, but it is something which kind of concerns us, that obviously it will affect them. It has and will continue to affect their lives.
So they had offers from like the Jeremy Kyle show and that kind of a thing.
They've had like lots of kind of TV and radio coverage, but I think the most significant thing is that kind of they have stuck their heads above the parapet in their kind of direct communities, and that's kind of all that really matters to them. And in a way, there is an extent to which that is a kind of scary thing to do, because as soon as you do that, you've put yourself up to be kind of shot down. And something which has kind of concerned us is that we've sort of taken them out of their kind of usual lives, and then to kind of like leave them possibly feeling quite kind of disappointed and bored in the aftermath could be quite kind of destructive. So we're trying to stay in touch as much as possible, but there were kind of concerning elements just in terms of like what they might put out there, that to a certain extent, one of them particularly has become slightly more aggressive as a result of it. Like we tried to kind of talk a lot to her about this, but kind of I think it's kind of, it's in response to potentially being kind of shot down for standing out. She's kind of really all guns blazing.
Is there kind of a like groups?
Yeah. We can wrap this up, but I think we probably should move on to the next project. That's okay, whenever.
Chat in the bar.
Can I say one thing really quickly, actually? When you talked about teenagers and mums watching stuff together, really interesting. If you ever watch X Factor and go on Twitter, it's all talking about teenage mums watching it with their daughters, talking to each other about watching the X Factor. They use it in a slightly unsophisticated way, so there won't be hashtags, but I just thought that might be interesting food for thought.
Actually, on Facebook, because they're all friends with me on Facebook, and they do chat a lot about Mary Byrne, who is the X Factor.
Thanks. I hope you find that of some use. Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
for your input there. So the next project is the first feature that I produced, which is called 100 Mornings. I don't know, has anyone seen it, or someone's worked on it? So we shot the film towards the end of 2008. It was made under this scheme in Ireland called Catalyst Scheme, which was a really brilliant thing in and of itself, because it got like about 150 filmmakers, writers, directors and producers all in a room together to start sharing ideas and thinking about ways to devise of feature films on a particular budget. And it was particularly for people to give them an opportunity to make their first film. And it was a competitive process, and 10 films were shortlisted and 3 were selected. So it was a great opportunity. And so since then, we premiered the film in Galway at the Fla in July last year, and then sent it to all the festivals and had deafening silence for quite some months. And in January, we were lucky enough to get selected for Slamdance, and that was a really exciting opportunity, and got great exposure for the film, and we won an award there. And since then, the kind of festival life of the film has really, really picked up. And then in the summer, we were lucky enough to win this award that Lance had initiated through the Workbook Project, which is called the Discovery and Distribution Award. And it's for a film that has not had any theatrical or any US distribution. Films from all over the world could enter. And so essentially it was really to kind of try and help a film to kind of reach an audience, to get exposure. They had a street team and a lot of kind of filmmakers who have collectives that they curate films themselves, who helped with the release that we did in Los Angeles, and it played for a week there in September, which was also a really great opportunity and a great learning experience too, as well, in terms of the world of DIY distribution. And now we're looking at doing our own release of the film probably in springtime next year. And the only reason for delay is because we've been just busy in production with other things. And also, I think, to be honest, the film almost gets more and more relevant the more we go on in our worlds. To give you a little idea about the film for your own reaction response, it's basically the story of 2 couples who are hiding. It's set in the wake of some disaster which is never really fully explained, and it's 2 couples who are hiding out in this lakeside cabin trying to survive this crisis, and they're just fending off the external threats that are kind of threatening harm on them, struggling with finding food and living, but also it's the kind of impact that this situation and living in such close quarters has on their own relationships. So it's post-apocalyptic drama, I guess you would say. And so there are quite a number of hooks, I guess. I mean, one of the things, even when we were doing the outreach before we did the release in Los Angeles, was in terms of kind of green activists and people who are involved in, the world of sustainability, because obviously those groups are extremely connected in and of themselves, and we thought that that would be one good angle to look at. And I suppose one of the things that I'd be interested in talking about, because I know particularly you had raised it earlier, is that the idea of the value of social networking and what that can bring to you and how it actually practically affects getting people through the door of a cinema. Because in my experience and what I had found was, it's something that can be incredibly time and labour intensive, and it's great for the exposure of your film, it's great for the profile, people build an awareness for it. But I'm just interested to hear views or how you can motivate it more to actually make a difference to people deciding to go to your film. So I'd be really interested to hear your experience, feedback on that, and also I suppose thinking about other ideas of platforms or little offshoots, things that we could do to try and help build the audience and market and promote the film as we take it through it to its Irish release, and also ultimately what we do with it internationally. Shoot.
Do you have a trailer?
Yes, 100mornings.com is the website. Thank you.
And in terms of sort of like traditional players, you've shown it to sales agents, distributors, and have you got any, is that your goal, is to self-distribute or to work with traditional?
Not entirely, to be honest. I mean, I'm a producer first and foremost, and so I'm really interested in the world of distribution, and I'm very keen to learn about that, and so I'm excited about looking at that here. But it's not something that I'm going to be able to take on trying to sell this myself through the rest of the world. I mean, what we're talking to at the moment actually was something that had come out of the Workbook project as well. We're talking to indie flicks who are interested in doing that. So that's a really exciting potential thing for
And indie flicks are thinking of representing it in the US?
They're thinking of representing it in the US just now.
There's some interest from large VOD for living room in the US, decent household.
And so what we're going to do is call it 100 with the numbers, because then it means it will show up quite
right at the top.
Yeah. So people might even buy it accidentally.
Exactly. There's accidental sales.
Yeah. Do you want to hit the lights there first, Kate? Do you mind? We'll try that. Thanks,
What is going on?
It's a good question. I knew it was coming. What are we gonna do? No need to worry about it.
What if I want to worry, Mark? Have you thought about that?
How are you getting on?
Wonderful. It's too much. I wish they weren't around all the time.
We're adapting. Surviving.
Run!
I get it. It's good to face up to things, isn't it, Hannah?
We need to stick together at least until we get...
Until what? It's gonna be okay.
We're gonna get through this. All of us.
Just enjoy what we have, we'll have it.
We need each other.
We'll find a way out of this. I know we will.
So I think in terms of your question on the social media side and actually having just gone through and done the release, like the stuff that worked most effectively is, it's very hard to convert from a social moment, like when somebody hears about it, to getting them actually to go to the theater. So for a lot of smaller films, like a day and date kind of method makes a lot more sense in terms of making it available across as many different platforms as possible at the same time. It's almost like 100 Mornings, you know, which is a really wonderful film. I think, you know, obviously, and we've talked about this before, it's just like there's a lot of really great hooks to it. You do have the sustainability side, you do have the, you know, a lot of, it's a fantasy element, the idea of the end of the world. And I think, you know, the possibility of building off of that, and there's a really great, you know, potential educational side to it, and some really wonderful things. But I think in the conversion within the short attention span of how social media works, is if, at least for smaller films, if it's not readily available across more than one platform, it's almost like, you know, what in retrospect, what would have been really cool to do with it would have been domestically to have released it simultaneously on a screen, but then also online, you know, in some particular form, you know, even through a partnership program with somebody like YouTube or something like that. Just because I think it would have been a lot more, it would have been seen a lot more, like it deserves to be.
At the moment.
So.
And it also might be easier to get some kind of partner involved, whether, again, I like this idea about sustainability, different environmental groups, the kind of questions that it raised. I mean, there are so many articles, or getting a kind of like publisher or somebody involved. There are so many articles in the paper, there are so many organisations who are questioning this thing. Even when you're thinking about collapses, you know, some of the questions that you're asking in a non-fictional world and putting into a fictional world, you can throw back in terms of that.
Well, and what's great about the project too is it's open-ended. You don't know exactly what's happened in it, you know, so you don't know what the trigger point is of this catastrophe. So in that sense, it leaves it very wide open for discussion, speculation, you know, people sharing what they would do in those particular scenarios. I think it just needs strong partnerships in order to push it no matter where you take it, you know.
And that's quite hard outside of the US, I think. You know, there are companies like IndieFlix that can kind of like go across all these platforms that have sizable audiences, where it's difficult outside of the US because everywhere's so fragmented. And we kind of don't have people, you don't have, you know, digital or agents who are representing films in a kind of nice bespoke way like IndieFlix.
Well, and also like just really quick, I think what's important to note is the opportunity for, you know, VOD in the States that you're kind of evaluating or looking at is substantial, because it's not very often that even titles that they have will get that kind of uptake or want that for, you know, for them personally. So I think you know, looking at it and saying, okay, well, the theatrical and then doing some type of VOD in the States probably would be beneficial in terms of any territorial stuff that you would do elsewhere, because you could point to the fact that it was happening in the US. So I think that's
we have a good LA Weekly review now.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question actually about that? Because I know certainly when we were doing our release of Pyjama Girls, like the theatres here, they were just like a day and date, because we originally talked about that for that. Try it out and see if it would work. I mean, certainly in Ireland, the theatres, the multiplexes are just like, we just don't want your film. It's going to be on at least whatever, I can't remember, whatever amount of weeks away from the DVD release. So, I mean, how is that in the States? Are people opening up a bit more today?
Well, I think it just depends. You know, a lot of people will push it through alternate screening venues and do it. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, like if I look at a thing like 100 Mornings, event-driven screenings would be much more effective, or event-driven screenings, even for your film, would be much more effective. Roll it up and show it in the neighborhoods where it's actually done, you know, find sponsorship to support that in some particular way. That's going to reach more people, and it's going to be more beneficial, and you won't be contained to the traditional windows that you face with exhibitors. I think you just really have to look at it and say, okay, what's the goal of the film? You know, is the goal of the film to be able to entice, you know, reach a wide audience because it has some social message? Is it to set up the ability to do more work? You know, how are you trying to position? Is it something where I could argue with 100 Mornings, you know, a good presence in the United States and a thorough strategy that starts to show how you roll it out is only going to benefit any of the additional films that you want to produce, especially now where the deals for those films are all falling away. You know, so it really takes kind of outside of the box stuff. But I'd say, you know, in both those cases, the first two that we've heard, you know, event-driven stuff, and then day-to-day eating it, and not necessarily worrying about whether it has a traditional run in a cinema. Because just real quick, you know, because after doing that in Los Angeles, now granted, Los Angeles, I think that weekend 31 films opened or something. You know, and LA is a very difficult market. You know, like can I say what the gross was? The gross was like $1,800. You know, and I think, like, you know, looking at that, it created value in other ways, but like I really do think that event-driven stuff is more valuable in a lot of ways. And a lot of the bookers in the States are looking at things, and it's very, very challenging to get a week-long run for anything.
Yeah.
You know, it's
One
very
of the
hard.
things that
And they don't get, even if you did want to show in a theatre, if you call it an event-driven screening, they don't get so scared of you saying it's a day and date. And that, I mean, it's the same everywhere you go. You know, the exhibitors will shut down on you. But if you say it's an event, then they don't treat it as a theatrical, and it's easier for them to deal with because they're not breaking. You know, they're not getting involved in the breaking of windows.
Potentially, you can also get a better split as well if you're doing an event, right? It's the other thing to think about.
Yeah.
Sorry, please. I'll just say one thing and then I'll shut up.
Sorry, Liz.
One thing I thought was kind of interesting, just looking at The Age of Stupid, which was you probably will know about Franny Armstrong, who did a film about climate change.
Yeah.
And she did the way she did her event-driven release, she did one in the UK at first to sort of test it out, and then she did a global one that was shown in Central Park. It was a kind of green carpet screening, she called it. And she did, you know, it was a great idea. She did this kind of solar-powered tent, and you could do something really interesting just around the whole event that's really creative about, you know, how would you release your film in a crisis like this? How would you go and see it? What's the environment? You could do it in kind of bizarre places, or you know, in a countryside, in a wood. It could be generated, you know, just creating it in some kind of event like that. And also the other side. I mean, Franny, you know, she wanted to release her film traditionally. She had a sales agent, Celluloid Dreams, who took it on internationally, but she ended up striking up kind of more. She'd never found it worked because it was going to be such a long lead time for the release of the film, and she had a date anyway to do with the climate change summit in Copenhagen, and it was always going to be the year later that it was going to be screened on a broadcaster if someone was going to purchase it. So she set up her own and actually it's working. And you know, these kind of services are kind of interesting, called indie screenings.
The demand screening.
So people setting up their own screenings, and it has its own licensing way that, you know, they send you a DVD, and according to how big the community, the person is who's demanded the DVD of the film for a, you know, screening. It's licensed, and you know, the license fee is different. So if it's a public limited company, if it's a not-for-profit, depending on how many people in the audience, you know, they're kind of interesting. There's
something kind of similar here called Access Cinema that's sort of the same. They basically service all the film clubs here, which is really interesting. And so they'll kind of say, okay, here's the films we have this season, and then the different film clubs around the country can book them, and they get, you get like a minimum guarantee of €100, or else if there's more people in the audience, you get whatever the larger amount is. But it's somewhat.
What about just taking it to where the people are? You know, I heard this really great thing, and I can't remember where I heard it. It might have been in Power Pixel, might have been somewhere else that I was, where somebody was talking to me about how they were taking films to call centers in India. You know, and taking them to where all the people were because there were 10,000, 20,000 people. And,
it was a guy who was an Indian guy who was working with call centres to distribute films.
And just take them there. So it's like in both cases, or and probably the third film. I don't know what the subject is, but I think, you know, taking it to where audiences are and making it relevant to those audiences and driving it in some way that makes it stand out. Like I said at the top today, you know, the best stuff that I ever have done, and it's surpassed, you know, like 17 cities of theatrical release, was just some event-driven stuff that was very, you know, minimum guarantees and better ticket price, you know, and it was more impactful.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been looking at doing is linking up with a network of clubs. And obviously clubs also come with promoters.
Like nightclubs, I mean.
Nightclubs, and they also come with promoters. And obviously the VJs coming through, so a lot of them have good acoustics, and now they're getting good data projectors, and some of them have got HD projectors in. And we've been looking at, we've tested it out with practice, and we've been doing some stuff with that. And also another thing that might be interesting for you guys to look at in kind of a mid-level, similar to what Franny did. I'm not sure if it might fit your guys' projects. I don't know, it's Dogworth with their, you can become a kind of rep. So
it's just documentaries, I think, isn't it?
Yeah,
social issues.
Yeah, kind of social issues, stuff. So that potentially they could be an interesting partner for you guys, but I was just thinking maybe there's a kind of a match there between kind of looking at the way that the kind of reps work in the industry, and because there's networks of clubs across Europe and there's networks of promoters across Europe, and if you have a platform that's open for them to access, then if you're kind of doing event-driven stuff, then
our project is a breakdance film, and that's something that kind of really kind of fits into that kind of.
But you kind of have there, you have like
tag into other kind of events that are already going on.
But what you kind of have there is you have a space already approved for your event release. You have promoters who know how to promote events, and it's just a case of finding a strategic partner. So it could be a newspaper, media organisation, it could be a charity, or it could be just somebody that's kind of got overarching, and you can kind of put those three components together, and it kind of gives you a wide sort of playground, but you don't have to be so kind of intensively managing it.
Well, I'm sorry, I was just going to say another thing would be to the whole thing that we're talking about today is transmedia, and in both instances I could see natural extensions to both projects. I could see a really nice kind of game elements could be applied to both. I think in terms of the pajama stuff, you could take that literally into schools, and you could do some really cool kind of social game stuff that related to the class structure and what the film was about and everything, and then actually be able to screen into schools and do something really interesting with that. And I think 100 Mornings could benefit from a very kind of, some type of a simple action-based, your actions impacted, what the future was or how that future played out. And it doesn't have to be, it could be a text-based turn play kind of thing. It could be very simple. But I think in both cases, and also, there's a strong educational component even to this film too, it has a little bit more challenging kind of, dependent upon the age, the age group.
Just
I was just going to say we should probably move on again, because I know we have to finish at 4, and I'd love to hear from Kirsten and John. Because obviously this is early stages.
Yeah, well, our film, we're just recording. Oh, great. Our film is called Dollhouse, and essentially it's the story of 5 kind of street teens, again, kind of north inner city kids who break into this house, in a kind of rich house by the sea in Dalkey, and the whole film takes place over the course of one night. And I suppose it's based on a series of revelations. The first revelation happens about 15 minutes in, and then there's a knock-on effect at how that kind of takes all of these kids who at the start you kind of think are quite one-dimensional, and kind of opens them up and shows their humanity as the film goes on. So in a weird way, we're hoping that the kind of wild ride of it, there's drugs, there's sex, there's drinking, there's music, it's very much a party as such, that kind of carries the energy, and it's very kind of raw. But underneath it all, that you would have an emotional kind of sucker punch to it as the revelations occur throughout the course of the night. So I suppose the other strange thing about it is that there wasn't a script as such. It was filmed off like a 15-page treatment, and a lot of the dialogue was improvised with the cast. So the casting process and the rehearsal process was very, very different, and in a way we're trying to think of how that has a knock-on effect into distribution, because it's definitely, like the words you were using earlier, like the counterculture and alternative spaces and a different way to do things. And, because the words that the characters speak are their own words, and they were cast very, very, very close to type, we want it to feel like it's their film, so I don't know if the traditional kind of one big sales agent and this is your poster and kind of manipulative way of going about that is going to work for it. So we're just kind of looking for new ways and new ideas and to start early. I suppose that's a big part.
Yeah. Well, I think like with just the setup of that, doing, and I know I keep coming back to the same thing, but I do feel like there could be some really great event-driven elements around that, you know, where you let people either step in and experience that world. You know, the location that you have seems exotic, what they're doing in it, all the different stuff. It seems like it would go really well with like a music festival or something that could be extended off of some other experience. You know, so like you could screen the film, or you could create a, you know, some type of a thing that people made their way through or felt like they were able to interact with, or you mix live performance. If these people are so close to the type, being able to do something with them when they're actually there, having it unfold over the course of that music festival or whatever it was leading up to the actual screening of the film, you know, like really kind of embracing that concept and kind of the escapist quality of it, but then the revelations that you say that you have within it that draw, you realize they're not so one-dimensional. But stuff like that, you know, could be interesting in terms of like something that was a different type of approach in regards to, you know, mining the value of the core of that. At least from what I just heard you say.
Yeah, because even, you know, in the casting of it, you know, the cast would joke all the way through. You know, we went for a boot camp week to the country, to a house, and they were joking it was like the Big Brother house for the whole week, you know, and same in filming, because they never knew day by day what the revelation was going to be that day, and it was a production nightmare to kind of keep those secrets from them, but it kind of, in terms of energy, it propelled the film forward all the time, the not knowing. So a kind of tricky question, I suppose, is how to market that with the spoiler alert kind of thing. And, you know, if it ends up being a very online thing, can you hold back that information, or should you hold back that information as to what the reveals are, you know?
Can I just ask, is it shot in the style of documentary?
Would you say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So it's something you
Yeah.
can play sort of as real.
Yeah, it could do, yeah. And in a lot of cases, yeah, it definitely crossed, the lines were really blurred actually. You know, like they would do something 5 minutes before we shot and it would be in then, you know, 5 minutes later. And there was a lot of kind of improv and genuine surprise reactions that will absolutely be in the film. So
you've got a very kind of a world there that's kind of really integrated into the team. Everybody kind of understands, which is something. So in terms of like, if I say to you like Skins, for example, in the UK, have you heard of them? Is it that kind of audience? Or am I asking offensive questions?
I mean, we'd hope, I think, it'd be a bit more, feel a bit more authentic, right?
Yeah, but in the
less
sense,
stylized.
I mean, in terms of the audience, in terms of the age group, it's that kind of
I think
age group.
that's what we'd aim for.
Because you've already got that kind of concept of the Skins party, the Facebook house
Facebook
trashing
parties, that sort of thing, that kind of culture.
and all that kind of stuff going
Squat
on.
parties and stuff, you know.
What was interesting about Skins, though, because I was going to mention Skins as well, is that actually teens felt it was really authentic.
Right, okay.
And especially because of the way that it was marketed, because it was marketed, I think it was first on MySpace actually, where they had that trailer, and it was pretty, for something that was about teenagers, and it was commissioned by a broadcast, it was pretty out there when you think about it, and it was written, and the way it was written very much from a point of view. The writer Brian Elsley wrote with his teenager, and their whole campaign was kind of great because it felt very authentic in terms of how they were trying to reach, and that was quite a few years ago, how they were reaching the audience. It wasn't a kind of top down.
It was also really interesting with Skins, because when you kind of drill through the stats about how their audience were interacting on things, it was kind of like in terms of the official space that they created, people were kind of dropping in and then dropping out again, and they were going out, the teenagers were going into the kind of spaces that they created. They weren't hanging out on the official MySpace blog. And that was kind of...
And also the production company, funnily enough, because it was done through Channel 4 site as well, the production company didn't realise until a year later, that they were totally missing out on a trick, on, you know, capturing their audience. And it was, they got, you know, it was actually something to do the titles to do a site that was all based around music and merchandise and other stuff around the actual series. So it was really good to start kind of at this time, I think. But it was like you said, people took what was in the official thing and went off.
Yeah.
And the production company kind of played no part in it actually, and probably Channel 4, which was really interesting.
I've got something to throw in, because obviously the digital natives are the people that are in your movie basically. is that if you get them to create a trailer with footage that you can give them and they can remix it, and the soundtrack, they can remix that, and they start to create lots of different versions of your trailer, so it takes away from you having to create an asset, but they're actually asking the audience to collaborate on that asset to do that. Also, if your characters are quite authentic and are improvising, you know, they may get them to start writing making of blogs and talking about the process before, so in retrospect, then also how they're feeling now with the film coming out, and how they're going to be perceived, then begin to say that maybe they are real characters and people start wondering who they are, and then afterwards when the film starts to do its cycle, wherever it goes, you've got the remixing happening, you've got the blogs happening, you've got all this sort of conversation happening, and other people will gravitate towards this and then become involved and participate, and then bring in all the other elements that people are talking about, and it'll start to spread out.
Okay,
if you just shot it now and you're about to go into post, this is the time now to just to put out a few bits yourself, and then get the cast to do it, and then roll it out.
I think it'd be really fun to play as real, and one thing as well would be to maybe kind of like keep your eye open in terms of current events and things that are going on, just to kind of subtly piggyback elements of the film, because obviously there might be scenes that you know. What did you shoot on? What format?
Red.
You shot on red, cool. So you can dip in and, you know, slightly piss off your editor, but there's a potential there, for example, to pull out little key scenes and just kind of grade them really quickly and drop them on sites to start kind of building a kind of a world, and you can play it for real. You know, almost to the kind of extent where you could go down maybe the alternative reality games route, or he's the king of
ARGs.
Alternate reality games. Oh, you know, also I would back it up in terms of the timeline, you know, and play with some of the actors prior to, you know, where they go into that. Like, I don't know where the film exactly starts, but, you know, to the point of like kind of taking them out and that blur between the reality and the non, you know, like, I mean, there's like, I guess it really depends. I mean, you have to be prepared for what happens when the audience actually realizes that what they're engaged in is actually not true, which is a dangerous line and can be very challenging. But I think what could be interesting is if you come back and you take those people and you give them some degree of voice and you play out, like expand whatever the backstory was, whatever that boot camp element that you mentioned was, like that idea that they, you know, I don't know if some die within the film or not, but, you know, wherever that timeline makes sense, then you can give them more time online. And then the other thing that might be really cool to do is, you mentioned a Big Brother thing to it, right? It might be really cool to tie some live element to what you're doing that could be done online in some particular way, where you took the actors or you did something that didn't tease out your initial story, but you played with like who they were as characters, you played with some of the themes, because you mentioned your spoiler thing, that you don't want to give that away, and then you kind of just stepped aside and let them live as those characters, but let them embody it, but you don't have to step on the storyline that you use in the film. You can put them in a similar kind of scenario, almost like what you did with your boot camp, but like literally do something that plays out in some context live. And I know that there's a lot of parties right now, both in Europe and in the States, who are very interested in stuff that can be serialized and that can be have a live component to it. You know, and you guys are right in the demo. That's a lot of interest, and what you described would be very enticing to, you know, not only certain social networks, but video sharing sites, and also, you know, some larger, some parties that you wouldn't, even gaming consoles, you know, who would be very interested in that aspect of like, okay, what's the balance of like, you could have these characters, you could do something that's like a spin-off, and then the film itself would come later and tell some particular story. Like if they have this behavior and they go and they break in, the chances are they've broken in other places, or characters would have broken into other things, or they develop that behavior to get there. You know, so like kind of taking advantage of that.
I think it all depends on how much material you prepared to create around as
no,
well.
No, I'm just thinking that you could easily take the people and if you still have access to them, and just shoot something that would be kind of played out in a live scenario with just closed circuit cameras. You could throw a party, you could do whatever you wanted, and just set those cameras up and just capture it live, you know.
Animation as well, played out animation.
Oh, is there animation in the film too?
So much as a teaser, if you don't want to give too much away. You could nearly drop it into an animation or into, you know, having that as an online entity. Who are these characters? Who are they? As a sort of
I mean, there are interesting stories that have kind of done that kind of thing, but they've been planned from the beginning. I mean, there's a couple I'm going to show just case studies in my workshop, but there was a case study called The Truth About Marika, where the actor, it involved having a real actor who was in character for 5 months before there was a TV series that came out in Sweden. It was a co-production with SVT, the main Swedish channel. There was a kind of 3-part drama series, and she was in character trying to find her friend, who then it was played out in a series, and it was all kind of constructed that then she attacked the TV channel after and said, "You've stolen my story," but it was kind of constructed from the beginning. But they're kind of, you know, I suppose you're alluding to that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like the danger of a hoax.
Yeah.
You know, like you have to be prepared for the backlash that comes with it.
And they had sort of disclaimers all over everything that was done. But it was kind of interesting because of what it was about. Nobody believed, well, half the people didn't believe the disclaimers, which was kind of funny as well.
Well, one of the things we did in the casting process was get them to interview, say on this boot camp week, they would interview each other as their characters, you know, with the cameras, and then I would watch it. They, you know, I wouldn't be there. I'd leave them alone, leave them for the night. They'd all get drunk and interview each other. And then a lot of that ended up in the film, you know, a lot of what they said or the
Not that actual footage, though.
Not the footage, no. But I guess it did actually start that way, you know, and the EPK was there almost every day on set for all those moments where, you know, they would get what was happening. And in terms of timing, my other question was, is there, can you do it too soon so that it starts to feel like an old film? I mean, what's the ideal timing when you're talking about online? And
it depends on how close it steps to what the movie is. You know, if some things can sustain long in advance, but you know, if you're going to just work with the materials that you have and this material, you know, then you might want to time it so it's a little bit closer to the release of the film.
Yeah.
You know, you might certain things might be too early. It depends. You know, you have a better idea of what digital assets you have. Like, I'm always trying to create as many digital assets as possible, so then, like, I'm not necessarily stepping on the story, or I'm expanding the story world that I'm creating, so that I can start, like, I have stuff that I've planted for the new project I planted 2.5 years ago that's out there that hasn't been found yet. So, you know, but that's like really kind of saying, okay, here I'm going to leave these things in these places. I'm going to bury this thing wherever it is. I'm going to do that, and then people will find it. It just takes time for it to pay off. It just really depends on what the goal is.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, it sounds like you have shot, you have all this stuff, you have this boot camp footage. If you're going to run with what you just have and you've described, you probably want to wait a little bit and not go too early.
Great. I think there's probably just, if anyone has we've only got a couple of minutes left,
but I'm conscious that maybe someone might have a question that they didn't get to ask. So if anyone does have a burning question, you can ask.
Not particularly a question, but it was just something that I kind of came up with. Someone was saying earlier about the call centers, and it was just something that's kind of interesting how artists or musicians or whatever are launching their new products at the moment. They go to Google, they visit the Google offices, or they visit the Facebook offices, and they have a little kind of a presentation of their work. And the idea is, I suppose, that people are kind of interested in Google, but you've got this kind of community of people who are there, who are right at the forefront of that. And something that we do have here, it might be something for the UK here, something maybe for one of the mornings, that the group, there's a lot of those companies are based in Ireland, Microsoft and Google and all that kind of stuff. And even the telecoms companies, the idea that you could say, go in with a presentation on our film and how we show the film to the staff in the thing, and definitely to companies like Google and eBay and stuff like that are very interested in that kind of thing, because they're more open than other companies, and it might be a way of that, because then you're trying to kind of spark off people talking about it or looking at it.
And I mean, that's what Bernard Brecht did, theatre practitioner. That's what he used to take theatre into non-traditional theatre venues and show it to the workers. So he used to tour factories and he used to tour things. So it's an idea from the past, what we're discussing here. you know, and that you can actually read about that, how they practiced and did that in theatre books, you know. So, you know, Benoit Brecht, check him out. He did all that stuff. So, yeah, it works, but you've got to think outside of the traditional rooms where you put in things. So.
Well, and strategically, if you go in, you don't know what initiatives or what Google might be doing with Google TV or their offerings or something that they want to get behind. And Google has a whole thing. They have a whole fund about, I think it's $200 million or something around social change-based stuff. You know, so you never know what could come out of those types of meetings.
Great. Just a question for the two directors. Do you produce everything yourselves, or have you been ever tempted to go with this traditional or producer in the business who has some experience? I mean, is this new environment changing your approach towards production? And maybe you should Lance a bit on this as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm the producer of the film I spoke about. Connor directed it, and so Maya's the director, Nikki produced, but Nikki also directs. I guess there's a lot of.
So we do a bit of a collective on it. We kind of take turns producing and directing.
Did you feel the need initially to keep production yourselves, or did you start out as producers?
Well, I started out in television, so I've done all the working in big companies. But yeah, it does kind of free you up a lot working. Yeah, sort of working in a way on a smaller scale is quite liberating in some ways, particularly with our budget. We went for the film board micro-budget scheme, and although that meant that our budget was low, it did kind of mean that we didn't have commissioning editors watching over us to the same extent as we would have done if we had had, say, an RTE commission. So it wasn't that.
Yeah, this one I'm delighted I didn't produce it. It's like John did. But I generally kind of go between both as well. But I suppose the budget model for this one was better that it was lower budget, actually, for the exact same reasons. You know, you don't have 10 people saying, you know, asking you questions. You can just actually make the film you want to make, you know. So, yeah.
And you felt that you could distribute it yourselves without relying on some experienced in the business?
Oh, that's a whole different question, I suppose. And I don't actually know the answer to it yet. I mean, what do you guys think as you've done it?
So you're about to say something else?
The projects I'm working on are all different levels. Like I'm doing one with Ted Hogan and Carrie, and they're producing it for me. It's a much larger budget, you know, and some of it's traditionally based. Some of the other stuff is like me producing it and making it happen. It just depends on the scale of it. You know, it's like, for me, it's every project is always different. You know, and it's evaluated on what that project is and what's best to tell that story. You know, and then I look at it and say, okay, these are the resources that I think I can bring to it, or I can help bring to it, even if it's a larger based project. In the case of the one that I'm doing with Ted Mann, you know, I'm doing all the transmedia based stuff that comes and meets like a much larger feature film property. So it just really depends. I mean, I've always felt like the more I know about the process, the more informed I can be, the better collaborator I am. You know, because then I at least understand the process, and then finding good collaborators and building a good team is like, it's as important as like casting, you know, when you're casting a film. So I think you have to really kind of ask yourself what you're up for. You know, if you're up for the whole DIY path, which is a considerable amount of work, and a lot of time, a lot of effort, can be years, even beyond the years it took to develop the work. So you really just kind of have to ask yourself what you're up for.
So I guess there's breakout sessions now. For anyone who's interested, you can sign up on either Liz, Lantis, or Feature Artists. Where are they?
Liz is here in this room. Jenny and Mark are over in the Grand Social, which is across the Hagley Bridge. It's what used to be Pravda, if anyone hasn't been there yet. And we're in the IFI, because that's going to be sharing stuff to talk about those. So that's. I think has everyone signed up for any workshop yet? Cool. Thanks so much.